I'm Mike Coyle, and you're watching Inside Exploration. Today I'm joined by Bob Archer, CEO of Newrange Gold Corp, listed on the TSX Venture under NRG. Bob, thanks so much for joining us today.
Hey Mike, great to see you.
Yeah, it's been a while. I guess the last time we had the opportunity to talk, we were on top of a mountain with lightning going off behind us. So this is a little different, but
yeah, indeed.
How are you
In some
holding up?
respects, good. I mean, it feels like there's a lot of maybe not lightning, but a lot of stuff going on around us in a different way. But this whole situation seems quite surreal and a little frustrating not being able to get down to Nevada and not being able to get going with our projects in Ontario. But things in Nevada have started to move forward, which is good, and hopefully we'll get going in Ontario before too long as well.
So before we get into Pamlico Ridge, I just want to kind of touch base on what you got going on in Canada and Red Lake. Have you had any developments on that front, and where are you at with the project right now?
Right. Well, as you know, we just optioned those projects in December, January, and after initial compilation, put together the application for a work permit to get in there this summer. But we had no sooner submitted those applications when the lockdown hit and all the restrictions and so on, and being up there, there is a notification process for First Nations, and given the impact of COVID-19 on the First Nations communities, they just haven't had the ability to review the various applications that were being submitted. So they actually asked the government to put a temporary hold on the application, on the permitting process. So that's what they've done, and so essentially there are no new permits being granted at the moment, and they've extended that period out to the end of June. And so we won't be able to start that process again until then, assuming it does get lifted at that point. And so then we'll hear back from initially First Nations if there are any questions or anything, and then the government itself will issue the permit. So it'll likely be late summer realistically before we can get into the North Birch project to really get going with our mapping and sampling programs. And in the interim, we've been undergoing a contract with a geophysical company in Toronto to reprocess the airborne magnetic survey, and so we're hoping that through that we'll maybe be able to get some more details and a better interpretation of what's actually happening in there, and that that combined with the groundwork when we get in there will allow us to pick up some, or to determine some very specific drill targets, such that we might not even need to do any additional groundwork such as IP or anything. We may be able to just go straight to drilling, and that being the case, depending on timing, we might actually be able to drill a few holes in the fall before the weather really turns. And but if not, perhaps by January, February, once everything's frozen up there, because it will be a fly-in operation. And so once the ground is frozen, it's often the best time to work in a terrain like that, anyways. And we should be drilling by then. So looking forward to that.
Trust me, you don't want to be in the bush right now. The bugs are getting really bad up here.
I can imagine. No, I know. I spent the first 15 years of my career working in Ontario and Quebec, and went to university in Sudbury, and where you are, and so I'm quite familiar with the bugs. That's why I say winter is often the best time to be working up there, because you can dress for 40 below, but it's hard to dress for the bugs.
Yeah, so you guys have been able to manage through COVID reasonably well. You've got the ground crew started there. But before we get into the drilling and what's going on in the company right now, I want to talk about what's gone on since our last site visit. You guys finished up some of the channel sampling and the old adits. You've continued on with the LiDAR. You've been compiling that data, and I just wanted to know, how is that helping this drill program? How did all that data factor into how you're managing this?
Yeah, it's actually been really good, Mike. When you were there, we went into the Good Hope mine, which you shot with the video, and that was terrific. And we continued from there over into Gold Bar, which is just adjacent to it. And we finished that now as well, and the guys moved on into the old Pamlico mine. So these are all along Pamlico Ridge, as you know, and that's the main focus of the drilling campaign at the moment. But one of the unexpected things that came out of that work was that once we had surveyed the underground workings and then plotted them up, in sort of a 3D model, we could see that there was an actual trend to the workings themselves, which I guess I shouldn't say that it was unexpected, but we just hadn't really thought about it much. In that, whenever you look at a section like that through an old mine, you can see that the workings have a particular trend to them because they're obviously following the economic mineralization, they're the highest grades, and that's exactly what what we've been seeing. It's very pronounced at Gold Bar, where the workings line up, level to level, along a trend that is very well defined in a kind of a north-south direction. And so, we call that a rake or a plunge, and that's north-south is a little bit different than the overall trend of Pamlico Ridge, which is kind of northwest-southeast, which is parallel to the Walker Lane, and some of the individual veins that you can see in the underground workings, both at Gold Bar and at Good Hope, are have a strike that's more or less northwest-southeast as well, and so having this north-south trend has told us that there's perhaps an overprinting structural control to the high-grade mineralization, and so that's going to help us a lot in terms of trying to delineate where the best mineralization is. And so as we get into those areas with the drill, knowing where those workings are now, of course, was one of the the initial purposes of doing this, so that we don't drill into them, because for one thing, you can get the rods jammed drilling into an open hole, but secondly, if you're drilling into an old stope, then the reason the stope is there is because the old miners have taken out the best stuff, and so you're not getting that in your drilling, and so it's really you're not getting any useful information. You want to be able to drill off the side where you can actually drill the mineralization in situ and see what it looks like, because if it's already been taken out, then you have no idea. So it's been very useful in that regard, and we're continuing on. There's still a lot of underground workings that we haven't worked on, but for the time being, the crews are helping out more with the drilling anyways. So sort of put that aspect of the program on hold for a little bit.
So you mentioned this north-south trend. Is that something that you're seeing in the IP surveys that you did as well, in conjunction with these old workings?
It's the IP survey. The lines are far enough apart, about 300 meters or so, that it's difficult just to see that trend in detail. But having said that, the trend of the main anomaly that we're seeing, the big one that we picked up, is in fact almost north-south. So whether that's just a coincidence, or they may be controlled by by that same structural overprint, it's quite possible.
So you've seen something that you liked. We were talking at PDAC, and you were highlighting some of those IP surveys to me, and you guys have picked up a little bit more land in and around that area. But you're not drilling that right now. Right now, you're focused on Pamlico Ridge, correct?
That's correct. Yeah. It's my firm belief in exploration that you need to work from a known to an unknown. Because if you don't fully understand all the various controls on the mineralization, which you almost never do in this business. You
Mm-hmm.
know, there's an old expression that, you know, you never really figure it out until after you've mined it. You know, in the early days, we're still on a learning curve. And if you step out too soon in the wrong direction, then, you know, you typically just end up with disappointing results, and
Yeah.
you don't learn anything from it, really. I mean, we're not in this business to find out where the gold isn't.
Yeah.
You know, we're trying to find out where it is. So we're starting in, you know, a little tighter to the underground workings, you know, where we know that they exist and where we've gotten good results, and you know, starting to drill a little bit of a gap between the previous drilling in 2017 and the Pamlico mine itself, where there's really no drilling, no information. So, you know, we're filling that in. But essentially, yeah, this first pass will be along Pamlico Ridge, shallow holes. You know, we know the mineralization is very close to surface, and you know, which in itself bodes well for you know, open pit mining.
Mm-hmm.
And so most of the first holes will be, you know, 100 meters or so, maybe less, and then we'll drill the holes that are permitted first, and we have about 30 to 35 of those that we can do. So, you know, that's going to take about 6 weeks or so
Mm-hmm.
to, you know, to drill those, and by that time, you know, we should have permits for the balance of the holes, a lot of which are still on Pamlico Ridge. You know, they're just not permitted at the moment. So,
Yeah.
you know, we'll come back and finish up with that program, and then at some point we'll switch over to the diamond drilling, which will be able to test the deeper targets, and that's where, you know, we'll test some of those stronger IP anomalies. Because really, you know, when you think about the IP, it's picking up, you know, predominantly remnant pyrite, you know, in the rocks.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I say remnant because of the level of oxidation and the degree of oxidation that's there. So, you know, there's not a lot of pyrite left at surface. And so the anomalies that we get at surface, such as the one that correlates well with the 2017 drilling and the mineralization that we saw there, it's quite a weak, subtle anomaly, simply because there's not much pyrite left in the rocks. But as you go deeper and you get out of the oxidation zone, you're getting back into fresher pyrite mineralization, and so the response is stronger in the IP, and that shows up, you know, on the survey. And you know, we have those maps on the website, and so you can see the stronger anomalies at depth, which, you know, we hope, you know, are reflecting, you know, fresher sulfides that you know, that could be associated with more gold mineralization. So that's where we'll need the diamond drill to test those deeper targets.
So once you complete your drilling this year, are you aiming towards building out a resource on the property in this year, or is that going to be a little further out?
Yeah, it won't be this year. You know, to do a resource, you really need to have a lot of close space drilling, and particularly on something like this with strong structural controls. You know, this is not like a big porphyry deposit where, you know, grades are nice and uniform and you can just drill every 50 meters and then connect the dots. You know, with this one, you know, you're probably going to have to drill, you know, maybe at 25-meter centers or something. You know, that's going to be a lot of drilling, and it ultimately, it'll also depend on what we find, you know, with this drilling program. And if we do find that some of these deeper targets are mineralized, then, you know, what starts as a single hole going down 300-400 meters, you know, may turn into a major drilling campaign on itself. You know, so it certainly won't be this year, you know, to do a resource, and then, but, you know, how far out, you know, will really depend on the results.
So I heard there was an earthquake down around there recently. Has that affected any of the workings at the mine at all?
Not to my knowledge, no. We haven't.
No.
I haven't heard that we've seen anything, or, you know, no effects really. I mean, Bob has told me that, Bob Carrington, that is, that, you know, Nevada gets tremors and earthquakes almost every day, you know, various
Yeah.
magnitudes. So it's nothing really out of the ordinary. And, you know, this one was a little bit stronger, but you know, for people in the towns, they might have seen a few things rattle on their shelves, but I mean, there's really not much infrastructure out on the project anyways, and you know, we haven't noticed any any impact of that.
Yeah, I would think some of those tunnels working through the old workings might have taken a little bit of a shaking in there. That'd be
Yeah,
interesting to see.
right. Yeah, it's possible. If the guys happened to be underground at the time, that might have loosened a little bit of dust in there or something. But
Yeah.
as I say, I haven't heard anything.
Sorry to get off track there. So back to the drilling that you're doing. So you're going to have some permits in about 6 weeks. This current campaign is going to take you about 6 weeks or so. Once you start expanding, do you intend on like just drilling right through as long as you can this year? Or are you going to do it in set campaigns?
There may be a short break as they switch over from RC to diamond drilling, at some point whenever that occurs. But it's the same company that's going to do both, so they'll just switch out the rig, and whether they switch out the crew as well or not, I'm not sure. But I think we'd like to just keep going. The funding for this will come from a combination of getting warrants and options exercised, and those both expire September, October of this year, and they're in the money, and so we do anticipate that they will get exercised, but exactly when is it's anyone's guess, really. People have a tendency to want to hold off on exercising their warrants, thinking that the share price is always going higher, and unfortunately people get caught doing that, we have about, I think it's about $1.4 million that we can bring in from the exercise of the warrants and options.
You just got to hit a few high grade areas, Bob, and it'll bring in
the
warrants.
It should, and so there's that, and then of course as part of the sale of our Colombian assets, those are cash and share deals, and so we still have almost 1 million shares of gold mining, which is TSX listed, and at current prices, that's pretty close to $1.5 million as well. And so our intent is to be able to fund the program through the proceeds of all of that, and but it's a question of trying to synchronize access to funds versus the spend, and so we just want to make sure that we keep that going, obviously, and don't get behind the 8 ball, so to speak.
Yeah. And how are the labs in Nevada right now? Like, are you going to have, what kind of a turnaround time are you expecting for your assays, or hoping for?
Yeah, I mean, historically, we've been getting, close to 6 weeks, 5 to 6 weeks turnaround, which is really, it's not so bad when you're just doing like the underground sampling and so on that we've been doing. But on a drill program, that becomes problematic because, as you pointed out, this is only going to take about 6 weeks to do this first pass on the drilling. And if it takes 6 weeks to get the results from the first hole, then you're pretty much finished the entire program before you can even start to interpret what you've got, and then go back and start to do the follow-up. So there is a new lab that has just started up in Reno, in Sparks, I believe, and so we're just starting to work with them, and our hope is they've been saying that they can give us much better turnaround, perhaps as good as 2 weeks. And so if they can do that, and allow us to get the results back, while we're still drilling, and then that would allow us to follow up on the results, and it just makes it that much more efficient and effective. So that's what we're hoping for, anyways. So with that in mind, it's possible that the company will start to get results before the end of June, or by the end of June, and then as we collect those results, we'll have to decide how to sort of package those up and release those to the market, and obviously there'll have to be some interpretation in there before we do that.
Well, that's excellent. That sounds like a pretty good turnaround time. I mean, 2 weeks is something to be rather optimistic about. So news pretty soon then.
I hope so. Yeah. As I say, we haven't sent anything in yet, so we haven't, but that's what we've been told, and
Yeah.
we'll keep our fingers crossed and see how it plays out.
Well, we won't wait so long to talk with you as this time, but we'll get together after you've released some results, and we'll talk about them and what you're seeing, and maybe you can give us a little bit better of an idea of what you're seeing geologically versus just from the sampling and the IP surveys and whatnot.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And no, I'm looking forward to this. It's a pretty exciting program, and first one really since I got involved in the company, and so from a personal standpoint, I'm really looking forward to it myself.
For sure. I mean, 2017 was pretty successful, and 2018 pretty successful in your exploration campaigns on that property. And I know you weren't part of it, but I'm hoping you hit some very similar style grades in some new areas, and give something everybody to be happy and excited about.
No, it would most definitely, and I mean that drilling was relatively concentrated compared to the size of the property and the size of the district. So, we have lots of other targets to test, and with the IP and this new interpretation, we're potentially looking at something that's about 2 kilometers across. So it's a big area, and if it all starts to come together, then it could be quite significant. So we're pretty excited about it.
Yeah, if we make it back down there, we'll have to spend a few more days because that property is quite extensive and there's lots to see, lots that we haven't seen yet. So
right, yeah, exactly, yeah. No, it's good. So,
well, thanks for taking the time today, Bob. It's been a pleasure, and we'll do this again very soon.
Okay, Mike, pleasure. Good to see you. Take care.
Cheers.